If I open a Japanese restaurant, they're gonna be like, "Who the fuck is this big,
who's
this big white
Spaniard,
guy?"
Texas, Mexican.
He speaks perfect Spanish, and he's not Japanese.
You're listening to Season 2 of the Mies podcast. I'm your host, Josh Sharkey, the founder and CEO of Mies, a culinary operating system for food professionals. On the show, we're going to talk to high performers in the food business, everything from chefs to CEOs, technologists, writers, investors, and more, about how they innovate and operate and how they consistently execute at a high level day after day. And I would really love it if you could drop us a 5-star review anywhere that you listen to your podcast. That could be Apple, that could be Spotify, it could be Google. I'm not picky. Anywhere works, but I really appreciate the support. And as always, I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I know it's been in the works for a while.
That's right, because actually...
we were supposed to do it before. I think you were going to come to Marea to do it, and then
That's
it just
right.
like it didn't line up, and then
then before
we pushed
it was
all
actually,
summer.
It was still at the Spaniard.
I still the Spaniard.
Yeah. Well, there was in Scampi.
Oh yeah.
I think I was.
Oh, poor Scampi.
Yeah. Well,
R.I.P.
we might talk about that.
Oh yeah. I saw your lineup.
I know. But I mean, I really have no recollection of when I saw you last. When was it?
I feel like it was an event. I have a very crazy memory, and you'll learn that in this interview that I remember like every second of my life. But I think it was an event. I felt like it was in Midtown, like upstairs somewhere, but it could have been like 7-8 years ago.
Yeah. It's what's funny is the last real memory I have of you was eating at Nobu.
People constantly like, oh, the Nobu days. I mean, and I was like, I left that restaurant 14 years ago.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's still like in my back pocket the way it was, could have been yesterday. You know?
Yeah.
But 5 years anywhere, 5 years in any restaurant, you're going to obviously put some sort of foundation, and it puts something in your brain that like never goes away.
I know. I feel like I've been brain dead lately because my son just went to kindergarten for the first time. So we like put him on the school bus this morning.
I just put mine in 6th grade yesterday.
Dude, it is honestly, I'm
middle school, dude.
That's insane. That's insane. My daughter's 3, my son's 5. But
nice.
I'm not an emotional person, but I was like, man,
yeah, it really is. Because it kind of it sets some sort of, you have that like nostalgia from when you were that age, but you also know that you're not them, but you also are their parent now. So you have to be like, you're like, I'm kind of in charge of you.
And
not,
you're also,
and not like your line cooks where you're like, I'm in charge of you, but go sleep somewhere else tonight.
yeah, and like you're like handing them off a bit.
Yeah.
And like,
oh my God.
You're
like,
farther along than I am by a bunch, I think, because you have a 6th grader and like a 3rd grader, right?
Yeah, I have 11 and 8. So
like the early years, 0 through 4 or 5, you're kind of just like keeping them alive.
For sure.
You know?
For
and
sure.
Like,
and it's that is your number one goal.
Yeah.
And I think it like a lot of humans need to feel it because it gives you some sort of perspective on the rest of life. Because then it like kind of slows everything else down, right? Because you're like, they actually depend on me.
Yeah.
Where everyone else is like, I know you depend on me, but like, you're going to be fine.
It does change you. Well, we might talk some more about parenting. I'll ask you some advice, but I luckily, I mean, I've known you since 2004.
Yeah.
When we were at Bouley together. I have memories of pouring blue food coloring.
Oh my God. 3 times.
Blue. How long? So
I was blue for a week.
So I mean,
Archana woke up blue the next day.
Well, you know what, you did well if you get dunked in blue.
I know. And I didn't realize that at the time, but I figured that it was like that was a
Were you upset?
Not at all, because I still thought I would need to go get that piece of fish next door for Cesar.
Yeah,
go get me a piece of turbo.
Yeah,
and I came out and the fish was blue.
Yeah,
and I'm like, what's he gonna think? And they're like, it's gonna be fine.
Yeah, I don't know if that happens as much anymore.
No, I got it at EMP too, but it was only because Jacob wanted to just fuck with me. But it doesn't, and it wasn't ever like hazing in the like negative sense. It meant that it was like some sort of like respect for what you had done, right?
Sometimes it got out of hand.
Sometimes it was not.
One time I didn't realize. I mean, this was just dumb. This was at Oceana. This was like 25 years ago. Like I poured a bunch of spices over this guy Johnny, but one of them was cayenne.
Oh no!
Burnt.
He's burning.
Yeah, but I remember another hazing that was like. I mean, hazing is the wrong word, by the way. It's like
exit, farewell.
Yeah.
We'll call it a farewell.
But I mean, this was terrible, actually. At Cafe Gray, we have pictures of this. We got a blow up doll, and we tied I forget who it was, to the doll, and then we threw water balloons at him that had food coloring in it. The food coloring weren't going to do. I remembered PJ, and I remembered, okay, let's put some food coloring.
I was blue for a week. I went to eat at the Danube the next day, and I was talking to a woman next to us who was an artist, and they sent out blue spatzel as a continuation of the farewell, let it be. And she's like, oh, I did an event once where I only made red food, and I like pulled my pant leg up, and then my leg was still blue.
He's like, are you part of the Blue Man Group?
Yeah. Like it wasn't even around yet. I think I invented the Blue Man Group.
That's hilarious.
It was great. And it was like, I never was upset by it, and I was very like gracious at the time and understanding of what it was. And that restaurant did a lot for my sort of psyche at that time.
We're gonna talk about Bouley as well. Luckily, this is always like the fun part about doing this thing is I just have an excuse for either myself or my assistants, like do a bunch of research on people like you.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize where you're from, Brownsville.
Yeah,
Texas.
Border.
Right, literally. Like
Matamoros,
right?
Yeah. I was probably in Mexico like two or three times a week.
That's
just
crazy.
As either like dinner with parents or drinking underage or, it's definitely an interesting border town. Now, my best friend ever in the world is the mayor of that town, which is obviously now it's a very interesting town now because of immigration and also SpaceX. Like Elon Musk is all up in my hometown, which is
in your hometown.
Yeah, he built. That's where they fly the rockets to Mars.
I didn't realize that.
Which is even more like, wait a minute,
that's not
Brownsville's not supposed to like.
So you're from this town, Brownsville, really, really southern.
As far south
Texas,
you can go.
Like,
both my parents grew up there. My mom's family came from Spain like 250 years ago. My dad's dad is from Bensonhurst.
So it's like the Spanish, migration.
Like King Ranch, all those guys. I mean, it was North Mexico at the time, and then it turned into Texas. But we've been always in this very interesting place of we live in Mexico or Texas, but we are Spanish, whichever, whatever that meant. You definitely spoke the language and you assimilate in the culture. And then my dad's dad was born in Bensonhurst and fought in the war and then made a friend in the war. And he's like, I'm going back to Brooklyn. And his buddy was like, don't go to Brooklyn. Come to Brownsville. It's like a boom town because the Mexican economy was very strong at the time. Mm-hmm. And he went down and they both started their own businesses and were amazing entrepreneurs. And I learned a lot from that.
What were the businesses they started?
My grandfather on my mom's side had a fish business. He had boats, and then they banned commercial fishing in Texas, so he started importing fish from Mexico and selling it all over the country.
Wait, they banned commercial fishing in Texas?
Commercial fin fish. They still don't allow shrimp.
Yeah.
But then he started importing fish from Mexico and selling it all over the country, which I mean, at the time, what a thing to know as a chef now, but I didn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
And then my dad's dad started a men's clothing store, like high-end Italian suits. And he was like the Italian from Brooklyn. So all these guys were like, if you're going to buy a suit, buy it from him.
And they're Southern Italian, right?
Yeah, Sicilian.
Oh, wow.
Sicilian and then Spanish side, Santander.
Wow.
So like two, north and south, but two amazing cultures to be surrounded by. Obviously, food and family were always very important things. And so those things were just kind of instilled in me there. And then you throw in the Mexican culture on top of it. It's a very and we had the beach. So I love to fish. I grew up around the water and it's a very interesting place to grow up, but I think moving to New York kind of maybe easier because I had seen so much already at that point.
Yeah. What's so funny is most of your career, Bouley, EMP, Nobu.
Japanese.
Japanese. So you got Japanese, French, more Japanese, more Japanese, more French, but no Italian until you got
No Italian. I mean, I remember Eli and I, we were talking about Eli called before. We were roommates. We met in culinary school. We were roommates. We were roommates here. We started a little business when we were sous chefs. We were like a catering company.
That's so funny. My buddy did the same thing.
We would cook on our days off, and make a little extra cash.
What was it called?
Sprout. Like Sprout chefs. Like we're just blossoming. It was brilliant. And we did some very cool events that were great. But Eli was a sous at Del Posto, and I was like, Eli, Italian. What? Come on, bro. I'm like, this is kind of hack, isn't it? And then I realized like it was the food of my culture and understanding like I really loved it. And I had learned so much at Nobu that I figured out that I loved raw fish and I loved pasta. And then so I kind of, those things came together, and then that was sort of, this is where I should be going. And I also reached a point where I'm like, if I open a Japanese restaurant, they're going to be like, who the fuck is this big, who's this big white
Spaniard,
guy?
Texas, Mexican.
He speaks perfect Spanish and he's not Japanese.
It's such a crazy like amalgamation of food, but I'm sure it impacts like how you cook today.
Surely. And obviously constantly like kind of putting those things together and understanding sort of flavor profiles. But people will always be like, how did you work at Nobu for so long? I was like, food is food. You know what I mean? Yeah. You understand cooking is cooking, right? We understand ingredients, the difference of ingredients, but cooking is cooking, you know?
Yeah, I will say though, like learning to cook, you know, sort of traditional, sort of a like French or American style food, like, you know, at a Bouley or a EMP or a Gramercy or something.
Right.
Like, is very different from learning how to cook Japanese food.
Surely, like, but you're learning technique over ingredients, right? And those are two different things. I always say that my brain is French and my heart is Italian. I'm very technique driven and I like systems and I like it to be exactly, but I like you to be able to be free and like be creative and cook like your grandmother's cooking. You know what I mean? She's not measuring, she's cooking. But in our restaurants, we need them to measure, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you were making every meal and every dish, then we could do it however we want. But obviously that's not how the business works.
No, it's not. No.
Hence,
unless you want to be a one-man show.
Exactly.
It's funny because Benno is going to come on the show on Friday this week, and I've been thinking about like things to ask him about because there's such a huge dichotomy between precision and pristine, you know, like high-end cooking and, you know, the soul of a grandma and cooking like that. And they're almost like, you know, contradictory. And like, how do you blend the two?
Which is why I feel like pasta's always been that kind of connector for me, where I'm like in a fancy restaurant, like we're in this neighborhood now. I worked at I Fiori for years, and I would be like, first course, I wanted to feel like something you never had before. And the pasta, mid course, I wanted to feel like your grandmother made it. And then last course, maybe like a blend of those two things. Like first one, you want to kind of be surprised by, and then the pasta, you want to feel like you feel warm by it, right? And it doesn't have to be overly creative, and it shouldn't be overthought, right? It should be like from the...
What makes great pasta? I mean, people always like overcomplicate it, over sauce and everything.
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I think understanding that the shape and the noodle is the most important part, right? And everything else around it is just like extra. And the texture of different pastas is what sort of creates what it does. And then you should never be able... You can't say, oh, we're making bolognese tonight, let's use capellini, right? And you're like, it's going to get lost. You know what I mean? You need to give it, there's a balance of like texture to sauce. And I texture is probably the most important part, but dry pasta, fresh pasta, they're all different things. I think there's a very much like a nostalgia to what pasta does for us, no matter what, or a noodle in itself, whether it being in China or in Italy or, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. You hear the word pasta, you immediately think of Italian food, but like my wife's from the Midwest.
Yeah.
Man, she makes this chicken paprikash, and like she makes these dumplings.
Yeah.
I don't think she realizes what she's making, but like they're insanely delicious and tender.
I can imagine.
You know, little pillows.
Yeah.
And completely Hungarian.
Sure.
You know, like nothing Italian about that, but like I feel
like we get into mostly like the cultural mixes of cuisine, right? Like obviously, I think every culture has a chicken and rice dish, and every culture has some sort of dumpling or some sort of noodle or some sort of flatbread. You know, my wife's Indian. You know, you worked with her at Tabla, and it was first time I went to her house. I was like, oh, biryani, it's arroz con pollo, and then I was like, oh, there's flatbread, it's tortillas, and I'm like, I'm home.
Yeah.
It's the same.
Yeah. It's funny too, Indian cuisine is a lot like Mexican cuisine.
Very much.
And like there's so many different regions and like,
but all inspired from, you know, the Portuguese at some point. And, you know, there was no tomatoes and cilantro in India until 1500s. Like that blows people's mind. There's no chilies in India. Until, like people are like, oh, you just assume that that's just the way they've eaten for years, you know?
I know.
But they always had black pepper.
Well, I want to kind of wind a little bit of like your like career, because like now you are sort of like not full circle, but you went back to Marea.
Kind of full circle.
But you started at Bouley. We worked together in early 2000s. You started as an extern on the I think you were on Garmache, right? I remember you making like terrines and
oh my god, the
the
eggplant
lobster
terrine.
artichoke terrine. And
That one, yeah. I got the eggplant terrine to a place that was magical, where Cesar would be like, "Who made this? It wasn't you. Tama made this, right?" And I was like, "No, I made it."
Was that before or after he said, "Where are my keys?"
Where are my fucking
my keys?
They were in my pocket. I looked down. I was like, "Oh."
All right, no. Sorry, Cesar. I love you. I mean, it was so long ago. I have things I took away from every job that are very like non-culinary takeaways. But like, what do you think? What did you take away from that? That was your first real.
First and foremost was discipline, and the fact that it was like I wasn't a kid anymore. Like I'd gone to school I'd gone to Texas A&M and wanted to be all of these things. I had worked in a restaurant before, Christopher's World Grill. Shout out to Christopher's. But it was not like at that level. And Bouley 04 was pretty much like it was the highest level of New York City, kind of at the time, right? We were all waiting for Per Se to open, but it was all, it was all. And immediately I realized like what kind of caliber it was. It was like the big leagues. And I had opportunity to be in it, and I wanted to be in it. I liked the speed. I didn't have a problem with the 80-hour weeks, 90-hour weeks, or the one day off, Tuesday, like the doubles on Sunday. Because then when I saw like how beautiful the food was, it made me just be so, I think, understanding of what the potential could be. I loved the food, the quality of the food, and the beauty and the flavors were incredible. Everything else was fucking backwards.
It was a shit show.
I mean, I was like first week of the job, and Evan comes around, Evan Rich, and he's like, "What do you need for tomorrow?" And he has a piece of parchment paper in his hand. And I'm like,
parchment order.
You're going to trust me on what we need for tomorrow? Like what kind of, and then I paid attention to that, and I made sure that I always had what I needed. But I knew then in that day that I would never run it that way.
Yeah.
Because it's too hard, right? The restaurant business is hard and cooking is hard. And I learned, I think, from there to take all the variables out of the equation, right? Like scheduling and ordering and inventory and all those things that are like the boring shit that nobody wants to do. But if you take that out of the equation, then we can like actually focus on what we're here to do, which is to make just delicious food, you know, and at volume, which is what we need in New York, right?
Yeah. And obviously it was a very positive experience, but so much to learn about like, what not to do.
There was no sous chef.
No, I mean,
Evan was sort of sous, but he was meat roast.
I thought he was the sous chef.
But he was meat roast.
Well, what's crazy
and Cesar was fish roast as the CDC. I mean, it doesn't.
Yeah, I struggled there, man. I came from Tabla, where, I mean, to be honest, I did really well there. And then I left and went to work for Kuntz.
Yeah.
Which I should have gone right there.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And, crushed it there as well. But like, honestly, I struggled at Bouley. And
Bouley didn't make it easy on anybody.
No. And they
wanted you to fail.
Yeah.
The first 3 months I was there, I saw 13 people.
Yeah.
Either quit or were fired.
And not in a good way. It wasn't like like survival of the fittest in a good way either.
I mean, I remember Josh getting there in the morning and being like, I have a list of things to do and I want to do them right. And there's no recipes.
Yeah.
And they're like, go. And then they would almost to the point where like they wanted you to fail.
Yeah.
Like the eggplant terrine, there's the 2 tilt skillets in the basement, right? The one on the right, you couldn't cook anything in. You could only boil in.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And then I'm starting to sear eggplant in it, and all these people are walking by me, and they're like, he's going to go down. And not one person was like, hey, bro, you shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Until there's smoke in the dining room during lunch, and Cesar's coming down and yelling at me.
Yeah.
And I remember looking in his eyes, and I was like, hey, I want to do this the right way. If you give me a little bit of guidance, I'm going to do it the right way every single time. But if you don't tell me, I'm going to fail.
What did he say?
He just looked at me mad and he was like, "Urgh," and he went back upstairs. That moment on, he sort of trusted me and saying, all right, there's an opportunity to give him a little bit more or try to show him something.
That was insightful of you to say that. I wish I had that sort of insight.
Football and Texas, where I'm like, I'm not afraid of you yelling at me.
Yeah.
That part, let's get to the main goal here and let's do this together. We need to do this together.
Some of the biggest takeaways are just, you have to set clear expectations and let people know what success looks like.
Oh, 100%.
I remember making the ocean herbal broth, which is like one of the most famous things.
It's and still so delicious. But it was like,
which is insane.
how many
in
herb
that, like,
purees and how many herb vegetable purees?
no recipe, no explanation,
Peel the fennel.
no explanation of any of these things. Yet this is like the signature dish.
But it's the signature dish.
And
can you imagine?
And you're just supposed to just, figure it out or not figure it out. And it's such a terrible way to...
Do you think that's how like the old French kitchens were?
I don't...
Are?
I don't know.
Was Cafe Grey more systematic? I mean, and Tableau was systematic.
Yes.
Right?
Everything was. There was, recipes and a clear way of how to do things.
Right.
And they wanted to teach you.
Right.
I think there was it was a very toxic culture that obviously came from the top down. I mean,
yeah.
Look, Bouley was one of the most talented chefs in, like
ever.
But, I have so many of these memories.
Dude,
I remember like
so
Arizang a steak because I was on whatever that station was with the foie and the
panache.
Yeah, the panache. And I'm like Arizang.
Why'd you name?
I'm like Arizang this steak, and like Bouley comes up and he's just like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm just finishing the steak."
Yeah.
He didn't even. By the way, he didn't even say anything to me.
Mm-hmm.
He just gave me this look like you should just go quit life.
Just go.
And then Evan's like,
under a rock.
Evan comes up and he's like, "Yeah, we don't baste here." I'm like, that would have been nice to know.
Dude, I remember that there was a moment where we were poaching lobsters, and he went through the phase where he didn't want to poach in butter anymore. We were poaching in like
oil,
canola oil.
Yeah, oil. Yeah.
Like what? I mean, that's sure.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I did an offsite. Some rich guy paid Bouley to come to his house. We went. It was great. Me and Evan, the whole team, whatever. And it was like 12 people, and who cares, right? I remember coming back. We came back late, and we went to Spotted Pig, and it just opened. And April was there, and obviously, did the whole thing as Bouley. The next day, I'm on my station. Cesar comes over, and he's like, Bouley said he did a good job yesterday. And I was like, finally, like one little like lift. And he turns to me and goes, I don't give a fuck what Bouley says. And I was like, oh God. I just like, there's just no winning. There's just, but I was like, all right, I got it.
But Cesar
would ask for shit on my station I didn't have to have.
Yeah.
And then I got good at it.
Yeah.
And I had it. And then he would get mad because I would have it. And he'd be like, where's that perfect diced tuna? Like, and I'm like, here. And he goes, fuck. And he'd walk away. I'm like, all right.
But
dude.
I think it's because he got it too.
Of course. But that's a very good point. And I think what I did, another takeaway is that because I was abused doesn't mean I needed to continue the abuse.
Yeah.
I took it the other way. I was like, look, I want to run this tight. I want to run this clean. I want people to be inspired here. I want people to stay here. And at the end of the day, it's only my name on the menu, not theirs. I'm the only one who looks like the asshole. Yeah, not them. So if you can lift them, then we can all do this, and we can like.
Of course, I honestly, he did have some really tough. I remember one time we were making this like duck terrine, and I was so excited about it, and we were making Cesar and I were making it together, and it was delicious. Yeah, and we were about to put it on the plate to serve for like a plate up pre-service, and then Bouley just walks in right before service, and all he does is walks up to Cesar. He's like, "This isn't a fucking brasserie." And he just like, dude, like, man.
But that sardine terrine he loved.
Oh yeah,
and I would cut that, and Bouley would get excited, and he'd be like, "Just keep doing it like that." I remember that. I'd be like, "All right, there was some positive reinforcement." Yeah, David had some positive reinforcement. Yes, where Cesar had very little. Yeah,
and I think Evan excelled there.
Evan did well. I mean, God, we would get to that point too, and I think he met Sarah there, and there was like. Evan he started there at what, like 20, from New Jersey and fit right in and was like, this is for me. And I think he got past the point of being like the peon. And then he was like, all right, now I'm kind of in charge. Yeah. And he kind of was in charge. Yeah.
I liked working with him. He's very stoic, quiet, and good guy. So after Bouley,
went back to school.
You were going to go to Tabla, but then
I wanted to. Floyd, Floyd was a family, another RIP, Floyd. Floyd went to the culinary school that my wife's aunt ran in India.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So when Floyd moved to the States, they're like, oh, there's these doctors in New Jersey. If you need anything, call them. And it's my now in-laws. So that's why Archana worked at Tabla before. She worked at Tabla before CIA. Yeah. She started Savory and she was like, what the fuck is this? And then she found pastry and fell in love, right?
This show is brought to you by, you guessed it, Mies. Mies helps thousands of restaurants and food service businesses all over the world build profitable menus, and scale their business successfully. If you're looking to organize your recipe IP and train your team to put out consistent product every day in less time than ever before, then Mies is just for you. And you can transform all those old Google Docs and Word docs and PDFs and spreadsheets and Google Sheets into dynamic, actionable recipes in Mies in lightning speed. Plus, stop all that manual work of processing invoices, because Mies will digitize all your purchases automatically. And there's a built-in database of ingredient yields, prep yields, and unit of measure conversions for every ingredient, which means you're going to get laser-accurate food costs in a fraction of the time. Visit www.getmeez.com. That's GETMEEZ.com to learn more. And check out the show notes moving forward, because we're going to be adding promotions and discount codes so that all of you lovely and brilliant Mies podcast listeners get a sweet deal on Mies.
But so when I was graduating from school, I was like, I want to work at Tabla. I like the food. I loved like the flavors. I liked Floyd. I went and trailed. He's like, you're great. Everything's perfect. And he's like, I don't have any spots.
Not even in the bread bar?
Like nothing. And it wasn't like he was trying to, he was recruiting me.
Yeah.
But he goes to go next door. 11 Madison's hiring.
This was Carrie Heffernan still there?
Carrie. And I met Jekyll. I met Chris Jekyll. He was on the pass that night. And I was like, all right, this will work. And I don't mind it. And I thought it was going to be like Bouley. And it was not anything like Bouley. I worked 5 stations in 3 months. And they just kept being like, wow, you're doing such a good job. We're going to keep moving you. And I was like, I want to keep learning. I need to I want to get pushed a little.
Yeah.
And my station partner, I was fish entremet, was this girl, Anna, her roommates were all the sous chefs at Nobu downtown. And she's like, they're opening a new Nobu in Midtown. And I'd eaten at Nobu, and I was like, wow, the food is really doing something to my brain. The way the Bouley food had, you know, like there's those few things where you're like, whoa. And so I went and trailed downtown, and it was not where I wanted to be. But I met Matt, who was a chef from London, and they were like opening in Midtown, and it was going to be a brand new restaurant. And it was still that sort of Nobu mentality, but with like a French influence, because they were all the London chefs coming. I took the job and I fell in love. I started working on omakase, and then I was able to
That's where you started?
I started as like lead line cook, but then I made a dish. I remember I made a dish before any of the sous chefs had as a special. And Matt was like, do it. We're doing it tonight. And then the creative side of me just went. So he kind of reinvented the omakase station for savory. I worked Monday to Friday, noon to close, and I was allowed to do whatever I wanted. And that's why I stayed for 5 years. I would put myself in the shits, man. I would run like 10 specials and do a different menu every night and like having the best time. And Nobu had regulars that had eaten there so like 100 times. And then all of a sudden they're getting dishes that are sort of in the Nobu style, but different. And they were like, anything, we want that. Yeah. And then, the sushi guys would let me cut raw fish. That was never had happened before. Yeah. They'd give me a block of tuna at a time. I'm like, guys, I'm not going to steal it. Like, I'm selling it, I promise.
How long did it take to work up to getting them to let you cut fish?
Probably a year, maybe more than a year.
That's actually pretty impressive.
And there was no butcher at Nobu, right? So everyone butchered their own fish, and they'd walk by you and be like, "Ha, for kitchen." But then you get in, it clicks, and then you start to understand it and you respect it. And then they were letting me do. And then Nobu, the man, would come in and see these dishes and hear about these dishes. And he'd be like, wow, it's pretty good. And Tamita-san from downtown would come up. He was tough, but he would try these dishes and he's like, all right, maybe we'll give this guy a shot, a little shot.
How often was Nobu there?
57, probably like 4 times a year.
Yeah.
And that's probably more than he's at most of them,
Yeah.
But 57 at the time was the biggest opening. It was the 14th Nobu when it opened in 2005. Wow. There's 50 plus now.
It's nuts.
It's nuts. And speaking of that place, like understanding the opposite of Bouley, everything was to the gram.
Yeah.
Every recipe to the gram. And they have their like mother sauces and you don't mess with them. And they're exactly the same every time. And then I learned a lot from that.
Yeah.
Sort of kind of being able to put things together and sort of using things you've already built or made, but then tweaking them slightly. You know what I mean?
Why did you leave?
I feel you. Chris,
but why?
Chris came all the way back around, Chris Jagel, and he was being offered CDC for Michael White. And I mean, my wife still to this day, she's like, if a job didn't fall in your lap, you were never going to leave.
Yeah.
Because I loved it. And I was allowed to do what I wanted. I was creative. My friends would come eat and they were like, wow.
Michael White's family is from the same town as you, right?
Michael White's grandparents moved to Brownsville as those like Wisconsin people do to escape winter.
That's so crazy.
Let's fast forward when I'm interviewing with him at Marea, which is so surreal. 2010. He asked me where I was from. I said, Texas, South Texas. He goes, not Brownsville. And I said, yeah, Brownsville. And he's like, shut the fuck up. And then we talked about Brownsville for 2 hours. And at the end of the interview, he goes, you can cook, right? And I'm like, I can cook. And he goes, all right, I guess you got a job. And we opened I Fiori, and I wanted it. I knew I needed a change. I needed to like, and it was that time where you're like, I'm either going to go like farm to table and like kind of like, oh, I'm butchering whole animals, or I'm going to go ultra fine dining. And at the time, the people that worked at Nobu were kind of looked as like, not hack, but like volume.
Mm-hmm.
But I had this super fine dining in my brain, and I know I wanted to go back to that like kind of real delicate stuff. We opened I Fiori, and it was fine. It wasn't my favorite.
Funny space. Like
dude, second floor of a hotel on 36th and 5th with no sign.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like, and I know Michael was coming from Marea, which was like biggest, baddest opening, and it was post 08. So everyone was like, you know, we opened well and we got 3 stars and we got a Michelin star. But it was like, it was very hard for me to keep cooks happy. And then there was some change, and then I was put in charge, and then I had a lot of fun. Like I changed the whole menu in a week.
It's nuts.
And just fun. But fun. And I had all the cooks that were like, and sous that were ready to go and like wanted it. It was the first time I had a huge team. Like I had 5 sous chefs and 30 cooks, you know?
Did you guys have to do room service as well?
No. That was part of the deal.
That's
no
nice.
Room service. We had to do breakfast though. That was the only.
Yeah.
But
that's not so bad.
Yeah. No room service. They designed that downstairs and they took care of all that. And we just had upstairs, which means we had like a smaller kitchen than we needed.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't mind that because it was one level. We were efficient and nobody could hide. I could see everyone at all times. You know, like those basement kitchens where you're like, where is that guy? Yeah. Where did he go? Oh, I went to the dry storage. And you're like half an hour later, the guy comes back. It was good. And it was, I loved learning from Michael about Italian. And it was like, you know, of the Riviera. So we were French too, which I had that in my back pocket. And then we were able to do like really.
What's it like working with him?
With who? Michael,
yeah.
It's great. He was, at that point, he already had so many restaurants and a lot of people that were the equivalent of me, right? Being sort of CDC of his space. And he just let me run with it, which is the same as what Nobu did. And that's why I stayed.
Yeah.
Both of them 5.5 years for some reason. And Scampi lasted 5.5 years. For some reason, that's that magic number for me.
Yeah.
But he let me cook. He inspired, obviously, some of the menu, but he let me cook what I wanted. And that was all I ever could ask for.
Yeah.
And then I ran 3 restaurants for him at the same time.
That's right. That's right.
Costada, we opened the steakhouse. And then we took over Bedford Post Inn. There was a point at Altamarea, I had 15 sous chefs and like 100 cooks. I remember doing an event in Mexico. It was me and James Kent, another R.I.P.
Yeah.
Marcus Glocker and all these guys. And James was about to have like a second restaurant. And he's like, how do you do it? How do you have more than one? I'm like, second one's the hardest. Third one's the easiest.
Yeah. Yeah. Second one is definitely
the hardest.
Yeah. Man, yeah, it is crazy, by the way, just as an aside. Like, I mean, I worked for Bouley, Floyd, and Gray, all of whom passed.
Yeah, dude. I mean, we're shit.
I don't know. You have to work for any more chefs.
Is there a target on my back?
Are you hiring? Because maybe
we are. I'm opening in Beverly Hills. You want to move? Move out west?
Yeah, I'd be LA. I'm going to ask this. You can just pass if you want. What happened
with
Michael?
I mean, COVID happened to everybody, you know, and it was like COVID, I think, was the first time that people were allowed to just really stop. And you know that. I mean, I fired 100 people in one day. And then the moment you didn't want to come back because you were still in that kind of like happy phase of hey, we have a break, where it's not just a break where you're like, oh, I'm off today, because the restaurant's open. It's not like people aren't getting paid.
Yeah.
I think it was hard for people to come back. I'm like, accept that a business is still a business.
Yeah.
And you need to but he's been gone for years.
What's he doing now?
He's opening a new place here, and he opened in
Was he at the
Miami
Rams Club?
He was. We've stayed in touch, but nothing like like any sort of any work relationship. You kind of you have it while you have it, and then
you did some crazy stuff during COVID. I mean, you had like a whole business going with like what was
barbecue.
That?
I mean, I knew we live in the burbs, we live in Short Hills, and we had made a lot of friends that were all great people, and we knew everyone was stuck. And I was the owner of 2 restaurants. It wasn't like I was jumping on unemployment. It was not an option.
Yeah.
And there was reached a certain point where I was like, I turned to Archana, my wife, and I was like, babe, I don't really want to like start something in our backyard, but we might need some sort of income. I'm from Texas, and I wanted to really do like a deep dive on barbecue. And she was like, no more toys. And then that, like a week in, Floyd had just died. And I was like, this shit is real. And we may not be like one of our neighbors who is a big regular at Scampi. She's like, hey, my in-laws are here, and it's like, we're all stuck together. Will you just make us dinner? And I'll pay you whatever. And I made her dinner, and it was like, it made me happy. I didn't feel like I was like, the steak got to our house. It was still like sizzling, and I knew I wanted to do barbecue. And so my wife, I told her, look, the only way to do this is that we're smoking meat outside, and I can do like 60 pounds of meat at one time. And we can do like, I said, 10 meals a week. That's all we're doing. First week we did 10, second week we did 20, third week we did 30. And then we like kind of capped it at 30 meals. It was great because my wife, Arch, is a pastry chef, but she hadn't worked in a while, being mom to our wonderful kids. And she was able to be part of the business. And we did something together that was, it was awesome. I mean, it was some of the best times
How
ever.
did you distribute the food?
Archana would deliver it. Well, because we live in Short Hills. So like literally the town is like this big. We had an app.
Oh, so it was all like
only in Short Hills. I mean, we had many rules. We sent out the menu on Monday. There was no alterations. It was dinner for 4 to 6. It was $150. I never repeated a menu. I had the best time. We built everything out of a box, right? Like everything was delivery. And then on that Friday, we would deliver between 5 and 6, and we would get 30 meals delivered in 1 hour. And people would be waiting at their front door like, we're so happy you're here.
You guys delivered it?
Washington did.
Wow.
Well, I would like split it up because we couldn't get all 30 in the car at the same time. So then it was like I had 2 shifts.
Yeah.
So it was still going out hot. Like,
it
was crazy. It was fun. We made some money. I had Pat LaFrida trucks delivering on my block. People were like, what the hell's going on? And Pat's like, dude, I'll sell you anything you want. Nobody's buying anything right now. To the point where we had like pallets of stuff coming down, and we created this little.
Did you have to buy refrigeration?
I already had a second really big fridge in my basement, and I had a drop freezer, and it was enough.
Yeah.
It was enough.
That's crazy,
but
man.
It was crazy what we were pulling off. But honestly, it was a quiet time for our sort of lifestyle. I got to spend time with my kids. We got to make really wonderful food that people were still talking about. People still now like, will you ever do that again? I'm like, no, but it was fun. We had a good time. The best part was the rumor. It was like, if you fell off the list, you could never get back on. So people were saying yes to it, even if they couldn't have it, rumor, which was not, but I didn't put that rumor out.
That's a good rumor.
I didn't put that rumor out, but
well, whoever did.
Yeah.
Good for
we
them.
had a good time, and it kept us afloat. The Spaniard reopened quickly. Scampi took us a long time to reopen.
Tell me about the Spaniard. I've actually never been.
Spaniard is a bar that I am a partner in. My partner's there. I was a regular at their first bar, which was Bua, St. Mark's between First and A.
Oh, yeah.
So when I was a sous at Nobu, they asked me to do a menu for them. And they opened a bar in Queens called Sweet Afton. So I would do like all my downtime, I was doing side gig. I was just always kind of just like the catering company with Eli. I did the menu for them at Sweet Afton, and then I did the menu for them at Penrose when I was a chef at I Fiori. And by the time that was their 3rd and 5th bar, by the time they were opening the 7th, they're like, stop being our consultant, be our partner.
Yeah.
Invest, but you had to invest, you know, and I invested in it. And we built this cool bar with me and Mikey, my partner there. And we had this list of just being like, we want really high end food, but it's still going to be a high volume bar. We still want really nice cocktails, but it's still, you know, and it's 7 years later, it's crushing. I mean,
awesome.
it's a machine, and it's wonderful to have, and it takes very little of my time, which is great.
What's the style of the food?
Just like gastropub, you know, like a perfect double cheeseburger, you know.
Oh, so not like Spanish cuisine?
No, not at all.
That's how bad. That's how little I know.
But you know,
about
when
it.
we were first opening, we had this guy who was selling like jamon and boquerones, and he goes, "The Spaniard, finally." And I was like, dude, we sell burgers and steaks. And he goes, shit. My partners are all Irish, and their favorite bar in the world is called the Spaniard in Cork. And we just use the name.
Nice.
But it's like iconic space, you know, West 4th and Barrow, corner spot, 20-foot ceilings. It's just one of those old school New York spots, you know.
Perfect spot.
So did that while I was at iFiore, and then I left iFiore and had some downtime. And was able to be there every day, which was, I think, really important at the beginning.
Yeah.
With not just the food, but like the staff and kind of constantly building, boosting. Then we did Scampi.
Different partners or same partners?
Different. Spaniard was all us, and we invested. And then Scampi, I got investors from outside.
What was the impetus for that?
For Scampi?
Yeah.
Well, I knew it was either get another job or finally do it for yourself. And we had just done the Spaniard, and it was going well, and I liked that idea. And so I raised some money and opened a restaurant, which now in hindsight, you know, I mean, was tricky. It was a very interesting process, right? We opened in 2017. I think rents were probably through the roof. We had a space across from Gramercy Tavern that fell through last minute because somebody else came in and paid more money, somebody from TV. And then we found a space on 18 between 5th and 6th, which was a good space and a pretty good deal, but a tricky address.
Yeah.
You know, open with, you know, a lot of good press, but it was at that time where it was like the day they announced Scampi was opening, Florence Fabricant was a big fan, and she's like, PJ is finally doing his own thing. Was the day like Harvey Weinstein was on the cover for all the other stuff. And so it wasn't a perfect time for what seems to be a big white guy opening an Italian restaurant. And it was around the time of like a lot of those same openings. So I think we got kind of ignored I never got reviewed. Like, you know, I got reviewed how many times for other people, and then you finally do it yourself. And then the New York Times is like, nah. Yeah. That's tricky, you know?
It was, I mean, I ate there, I think, a few times early on, and then after. It was always awesome. The bomba, is that what it is?
Yeah.
That shit is, what is that, man? This is like crack.
Pickled shallots, pickled artichokes, pickled mushrooms, tomato, Calabrian chili, and we blend it all together. Because I bought it, you buy it in a jar.
Yeah.
You buy it, and it was always too spicy. And I wanted to make my version of it.
And always like a little acrid too.
Right. I want to make my version of it, which we made in-house, and it was more balanced and just a beautiful texture. And then we became something we used for so many different things.
I mean, you should just jar that shit.
I'm starting a jar company.
Yeah. That stuff, I mean, it's so good. I forget what you serve it with, but I just remember.
Well, at the beginning, you would get it on the table with the grissini, with the house-made breadsticks.
That's right.
But then the idea for me was that I wanted a condiment on the table for your whole meal. If you wanted to add a little more texture, or you wanted to add some heat, or you wanted to, and people would just be like, "Can I get another one? Can I get another one?" And you're like, "Oh, there's something to this," you know?
Yeah, that stuff was good, and the Mafaldini was really good too. That was it. Shrimp,
Scampi, which we now do in Marea, but with king crab.
Oh, gotcha.
The most interesting thing about me coming to Marea now is that all that food that I loved and came up with at Scampi that maybe not everyone had tried or seen is translating very, very well into.
Oh yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
You know what I mean? It's like Southern Italian, coastal seafood.
Yeah.
We do minor tweaks here and there, but they're all dishes I created. You know.
Yeah. You said big white guy, so if it's okay,
I know.
You don't have to.
It's
but,
okay. I'll talk about anything.
I mean, obviously, when we met and knowing you for a while, like you were a larger guy.
Well,
I think
Bouley, when I worked at Bouley, I lost like 50 pounds working there.
Oh, wow. It was like 140 degrees at that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when they're like, how hot was the corner? And you're like, the thermometer melted to the wall.
Yeah. Yeah.
I lost weight, and then I went back to school and gained weight and realized that it was like a terrible path. I already had, a wife or, a girlfriend, and we had children, but I knew there was like a change needed to happen. And I was having a hard time sort of doing it myself, right? Like just kind of this whole idea of you're like, why are you, it happens a lot for larger people. You're like, why? But I'm skinny. Why can't you be? And it's like, it's a different part of the brain. I did some research on, gastric bypass versus sleeve or whatever. And finally just bit the bullet. February 12th, 2020, a month before pandemic. Had an hour-long surgery, and I lost 100 pounds. I lost 100 pounds in the first 100 days.
That's insane.
It's insane. But it felt great. And I would stand 15 hours a day as I was the big boy. You know what I mean? So then it became like, wow, it's so nice to be active and spend time with your kids and like not, all those things, like not be, going up 3 flights of stairs is no big deal,
Yeah. I read somewhere, you said like through therapy, you also like uncover like the root cause. But you didn't mention what do you think was the root cause of that?
Well, it's a lot of sort of, some unhappiness, right? Or some sort of depression. My parents got divorced when I was like 9. And it was like everything was kind of perfect. And then all of a sudden it was like, stop. And you realize that there's something there, and it became a drug. Food became a drug where it was like you needed to fill it with something. And it was, I'd go out and have drinks with the guys and then go home and put a huge sandwich. And it was just like, it was unhealthy consumption, which was it was like sort of difficult for me to process because I make food for a living, right? So I'm like, I'm going to make my stomach small and not be able to eat a lot, but I'm going to cook food for you. So it was like very tricky in that sense. And then I got to the point where like, oh, wow, I can eat all day. I just can't eat a lot at the same time, which is honestly a much healthier way to eat. And now I really I'm very specific on what. Now it makes me want to like write a book of like perfect bites. Cause you're like, if you only had room for one bite, what would it be? And then it'd be like,
I think that's what a big part of the right way to eat is, just having the right kind of calories. And not just nutritionally the right kind of calories, but like, hey, is that something that you really are going to enjoy?
Definitely. And there's obviously going to be things that you don't need that are, nobody needs to eat a bag of Doritos.
It is.
That doesn't mean that they're not good every once in a while. You know what I mean? Like,
we all have our thing, right? Everybody, the majority of people have like a thing that we do to manage stress.
Sure.
I remember, take it for what it's worth, like Louis C.K. is a very controversial dude.
Yeah.
He went back on stage after the thing happened.
Sure.
And he's like, everybody knows my thing. We all have a thing. You all know what mine is.
Right.
We all have something that that we do to manage stress. And it is tough when when you're like, man, why couldn't my thing be this? Some people, by the way, have exercise. Like,
surely. Oh, yeah, I'm a runner. You're like, I'm feeling stressed out right now. I'm going to go run 10 miles. You're like, wait, what? Oh, my God.
But, and it usually like catalyzes like pretty early. We're like, that's the thing.
Definitely. And then, I think therapy has helped through all of that. And I got very good at being able to speak about myself and understanding the things that had happened to me in the past were potentially not my fault. And then that point, just like, I'm going to tell everyone now, listen to Elsa's advice. Let it go.
Clearly you have some daughters.
I have a daughter, yes.
I think you've been such an incredible like cook and chef for so long. So like, did it even, like, what kind of impact did it have on, other than like endurance?
Well, the craziest part was that it was in the middle of the pandemic. I hadn't seen people in 6 months, and all of a sudden they're like, I remember sitting at a table in South Beach Food and Wine with people I knew very well, and they're like, hi, I'm so-and-so, and I'm like, PJ. And they're like, shut the fuck up. Now it's just like such a joy to be able to like go for a long walk, or to be like never have the knee pain or the back pain. Like everything went away. I had the only unhealthy thing I had besides being heavy was I had like slightly high blood pressure. The moment I lost weight, it all went away. Everything went away. And then you're like, all right, you're creating a longer life for yourself, a healthier life, a better example for my children, right? My daughter's 8 now. She doesn't even remember. Like, she sees the pictures of me before and she's like, whoa, who's that guy?
Oh, yeah. Because, they're probably at that age.
Because she's 8. She was 4 when it happened. Like, that's half her life, But it mostly for me is setting a better example for my children and just being able to kind of And it makes obviously everything much easier.
Yeah. And I'm sure your children also seeing that change, like, wow, daddy can really.
Oh,
like,
huge.
you know.
And it made my relationship with my wife better. And it made like everyone's happier. And I have zero regrets.
Yeah. Well,
one of the best things I ever did.
Yeah. It's amazing, man.
Yeah.
And
4 years in, still held it off, where everyone is like, oh, you could go back. I'm like,
yeah. And that's the toughest
there's
part.
no going back.
You know, that's the
You
toughest
see a
part.
fluctuation here and there, this way any human does now, but there's never that like seeing the number and being like, there's no way for me to fix this.
Have you replaced the eating with something else?
No, I mean, I feel like it's created such a happy place for me that it's like time with friends is so much better. I'm better at talking, I'm better at laughing, I'm better at like communicating. I used to be like a very kind of introverted guy and I was kind of shy. And now I'm like, I'm the chef at Fiore, Michelin stars, and I didn't want to go to the dining room because I was like, ugh.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, Marea dining room. I'm like, hey, how are you doing? Oh, I think understanding like what we've made and what we've done and being proud of it.
Yeah.
You know.
So how's it going at Marea?
It's great. I love it. When I finally decided we needed to close Scampi, which was obviously a very tricky and hard decision to make, it's like, it's a child, essentially. You know, I kind of put myself out there and I looked at it like I'm a free agent, not a failure, right? Yeah. And Amas and I, the owner of Altamarea Group, we've always been very close. And I reached out and he's like, hey, kind of Marea needs a little bit of help. And I had worked there one day ever. I trailed there before I got the job at Fiore. And I went in, took a look, and I was like, I think this is for me. And I think I had realized at the point where like everything matters, like location. There's not a better location for a restaurant in New York City. And I already understood the cuisine and I knew I wasn't having to build it from scratch and I knew I could come in and help. And so I started May or June of last year and then for 2 weeks and then we closed for 4 months to do renovations, which was also part of the deal.
What did you do during the 4 months?
They just needed new floors and ceilings.
What did you do?
I just kind of bounced around the other restaurants. I spent some time, went back to Fiore, which was very surreal. I'm like, I know this place. I'm at Fiore last summer. And this like young cook who doesn't really know me, there's still some of my dishes on the menu. And I'm plating something and he goes, chef, you're not plating it right. And I was like, I invented this dish, but okay, you're in charge.
That's awesome.
No, I spent some time like really, like we recipe tested every single thing that had ever been on the menu to get it back to the gram and to where we wanted it and kind of prepared for a reopening.
Yeah.
And then reopened last October and it's been gangbusters ever since.
Yeah. Did you keep a lot of it on the menu?
I kept the stuff that you can't take off.
Like the octopus.
Obviously fusilli and the lobster with burrata and a few pastas, a few things, but changed a lot.
Yeah.
A lot in the best of ways. But always in the style of what that restaurant is. So then everyone now is like, oh, now we really...
Yeah.
People love that restaurant. It has that kind of love the way that I felt like people had for Nobu, which there's not, I hadn't worked in a lot where people walk in and they're like, this is what I want. And then you give them things that are new and fresh. It reminded me a lot of working omakase at Nobu. Like there's obviously the staples, but then you're giving them things that are in that same style, but they love it. And then they really, then they become more loyal than they've ever been.
Yeah. Is your R&D process any sort of, like, is there anything unique or novel about it? Or like,
I like to be inspired by, honestly, first visually. Like I see it in my head before I cook it, which is, that can be very tricky because when you can't put it on the plate the way you've seen it, that can be frustrating, right? Sometimes you put it on the plate even better than you've seen it, and that can be really fulfilling. I've always been inspired by classics. I love spinning them on their heads. I love doing like multiple versions of the same thing on the same plate, which is not no reinvention. That's everyone's been doing that.
How do you involve your team? Are they a part of that process?
I let them, so I give them essentially like a guideline, right? I say, this is kind of what we're working on. I would love for you to do this. And it took me years for it to even let them do that. Like it would be like, I would make it and then they would just copy. And then I realized like for these people to stick around, they've got to make it.
Yeah.
I let them make the dish. We tweak it together. We make it better. I know how to make it better. Then they're proud that it's still their dish and it's better. And then they'll make sure that it's always the same because they've had such an impact on the first iteration of the dish, right?
So better, right? How do you measure that? Like
Texture, seasoning at times.
Is there customer feedback as part of this, or is it all like
No.
basically however you?
No, at that point, I mean, I was looking at the run of show today, and it was like, by the time it's hit the menu, there's no changes.
Yeah.
And if it's had to be worked 10 times over, then it probably never needed to be on the menu. You know what I mean? So it's like, we get it right away. I mean, I think there's like 2 or 3 iterations, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh. Every once in a while, there'll be a dish where you've seen it for the 50th time, and you're like, all right, it doesn't need this, or it could use this. But most of the time, we get better and better at making the same thing. And it makes me like, it gives me such joy to watch those dishes come up on the pass and be like,
yeah,
it's nice, you know?
Yeah. I always feel it's, something's working when you're removing things from it.
Surely. And I think that like all the years at Nobu and the years at working Italian, like those are 2 cuisines that it's like less is more. It's quality of ingredients, putting things together that should go together. Don't overthink it. Don't put things on the plate to just to put it. And back to what we were like, the whole idea of potentially, being aggressive to staff because you were at one point, that was the same with the meat and right?
Yeah.
Like the amount of dishes that were hard just to be hard, not because it was taste better, but just to be hard. And I was a firm believer of like, fuck that.
Yeah.
Why? It's going to taste delicious, but I'm not going to make it harder on you because I'm like, oh,
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, what's like the dish you're most proud of?
Oh, man.
By the way, overall, like all these places.
All of them? I don't think I could pick one. There's a lot. I mean,
maybe just pick one that first comes to mind.
Like the Bronzino tartare right now is another, like you're talking about the Bomba before. We make our own Calabrian crunch, essentially like chili crunch that everyone, sorry, David Chang. But I have this combo of like perfectly diced Bronzino with the Calabrian crunch, toasted pistachios, and like a lot of pistachios where you're getting that balance. You still can taste the fish. It's pretty. It's tasty. We had a couple in the restaurant the other night, and they had come in for dinner. They had that, and then they left. They went to a show, and they came back, and I met them on the way back at the bar at Marea, and they're like, we had to come back. And I was like, oh, for dessert? And they're like, no, for that Bronzino. Like, and we had it 4 hours ago, but we needed it one more time. And I was like, what a feeling, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
amazing.
That's an amazing feeling for someone to, and that's a dish where like I'll have friends come in and they'll have it. They've had it 50 times and they're like, I'll never get tired of it. It's like the Yellow Hotel jalapeno, right? It's those dishes, you create something that you know is timeless, essentially. How could you not be proud of it, right?
Yeah, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
I don't ask this often, but I don't ever get to go out anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I live in Westchester, and I get to stay like once a week. And my wife and I usually go out to eat in Westchester.
Yeah.
What's like the most underappreciated restaurant or couple of restaurants in the city?
I mean, I'll be honest with you in the same that like I live in the burbs and have 2 kids and don't get out much, It's not so much about underrated restaurant, maybe underrated chefs, right? Like I love seeing Harold Dieterle back in the game, and I haven't been to his new restaurant yet, but everything he ever did before I really loved.
Yeah.
And I feel like he potentially didn't ever get the right process. Another Harold Moore, right? Another great cook. And potentially maybe had the wrong partners, or maybe there was definitely nothing wrong with what he was cooking,
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that, I kind of felt that when we opened Scampi. And so now I'm like, give these guys opportunities in the right places. I think we have an opportunity now to like create a better approach for these restaurants,
Yeah. Any other chefs or like contemporaries that like you look up to? Or
I mean, Marcus Glocker, I've always loved. Obviously, James.
I love Marcus.
James.
Great.
But James and I were very close, and in that same sort of, those are our contemporaries, right? Marcus, James, the Heralds, the guy JP at Autoboy and Automix. I mean, talk about spinning Korean on its head in the best of ways. Perfect timing for that. Loved all that.
Have you been to Evan's Spot in San Francisco?
I never have.
It's really good.
I know. I've heard, and I've sent so many friends there.
Yeah.
I've never been to San Francisco.
What?
I know.
We should have done the show in San Francisco, man.
Sure. Kind of travel budget you got.
There is some really good food in
I know. And my best friend growing up used to live there for a while. He lives in Austin now, but it just was never convenient, and it was far. And if I had like a week off, I was going to go to Europe, not to San Francisco. You know what I mean? So I would go to France, I go to Italy, or go to Spain. Now we're opening in LA, so I've been going to West Coast a lot more. Now I'm definitely have some free time to kind of just sneak up and check it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, Evan and Sarah, I mean, love everything they've done. They were very instrumental in like being sort of, they were kind to me at Bouley, which I needed at the time. But Sarah, a Texan, and Evan, a New Jersey, and we were like the opposite. My wife's New Jersey. And
That's right.
And it was like, you know.
Yeah, it's funny. The first time I went to San Francisco was when, do you remember at Bouley when we put in the new Maltini stove?
Yeah.
And we had a week off. So I ate a per se that night, or like that Sunday night with Santos and his Veronica and this friend of mine. And the next morning I flew to San Francisco for the first, I'd never been there before.
Yeah.
And ate, I ate the fifth floor of
and
stuff. And that was my first time there ever. I mean, that was.
I mean, I want, Alice Waters. I want to just go I want that. I want like that old school, those kind of places.
You know what? I think I just didn't order right. I didn't have like the most amazing one there.
Or
at Zuni. Yeah, or at Zuni.
At Zuni, but the chicken is what everyone talks about,
yeah,
right?
Which is delicious.
Yeah, but like, come on.
There's some really good spots there now, though. LA too.
LA has been amazing. We've been there a lot. We're opening there in a few months. Spent some time there. The produce incredible. Mozza. I mean, Nancy's been super sweet to us, knowing that we're coming to town, and like been very inviting and welcoming. And
so you gonna have to spend more time in LA now?
Yeah. I'll be his chef of that one too.
How's that gonna work? Take the kids with you?
Yeah, they'll come out.
Yeah.
I mean, not for the whole time, and like. I'll go, if I'm not coming home, my wife will come visit, or she'll bring the kids out. I think it gives us another bit of a, airplane's an airplane, right? And we live in Short Hills. Like I'm 10 minutes from Newark.
Yeah.
A commute to Manhattan might as well be the commute to LA. You know what I mean? And obviously it's a little bit longer, but I'm excited for what it can be. I think Beverly Hills and LA is kind of ready for like a fine dining Italian spot that's a little bit different than what they're used to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it'll be, I'm just so excited for new seafood, new produce. Like that part we've kind of always we love it in the summer here, but all the other months of the year, we're getting everything from somewhere else,
Yeah, you're going to have it year round.
Yeah,
Crazy.
Exactly. I'm talking to my pastry chef, and she's like, "Chef, what about this, this, and this?" And I was like, "How about like a bowl of stone fruit with like a perfect custard?" And like, that's it. And she's like, "Wow, that sounds perfect." And I'm like, "That is perfect." Yeah. And you're like, and you eat the peach, and you're like, "Wow, this is the most delicious thing I've ever eaten in my life." And you're like, just let it be.
What do you think is the next, I don't know if you think about this, but the next 5 years or so of your career?
I think now, I mean, I'm, cooking in New York for 20. This is my 20th anniversary of cooking in New York City. Marea has been great to me, and I feel like it's a brand that I can really kind of move forward with. I don't think I need much more growth past that, other than being outside of the kitchen. I kind of want to do this more, like talking and getting people to talk about what our industry's been like, and like kind of, it's another form of therapy, if you really, if you will, and some sort of entertainment. I'm the 12 people that will listen to this will love us. But I think giving us a platform, a few side gigs. Like I said, we're starting a little spice brand, and we're doing like things from other angles. I think we're in a very good place for chefs, like with the bear and all of these things. I think we're getting some sort of a good amount of attention in a good way. Not we've paid for our past sins, the third floor of Spotted Pig and all of these things that were like not us, but we kind of got blamed for it. And now I think we have an opportunity to be like, look, we are the sort of leaders of this industry, and like food's not going away, and people are more appreciative of really nice things than they ever have been. So we just need to be kind of the ambassadors for really good food, and have people having a good time. It's an experience.
It's pretty incredible how the industry there's obviously a lot of things that have improved, but just the amount of talent, and then how that amount of talent has translated to the options of good things.
Surely. I mean, just the industries that have been created around that talent.
Yeah.
And man, so you don't want to be stuck in a hot kitchen all night. It doesn't mean you can't be a chef, or you can't be in this industry. And like, it's amazing to see. And honestly, it's not going anywhere, and people love nice things and they're willing to pay for it.
Yeah. So let's end on this. And then this is a little bit like, I know it sounds whatever, but let's zoom back to PJ. He just started at Bouley, whatever it is, the new Bouley. What do you want to tell him, which means what you're going to tell all these cooks starting today, that like you wish you knew, or that might be something that's not so obvious?
Yeah. I mean, I think it was like, I took that experience the way I kind of potentially had squandered my first attempt at college, right? Where I was like, if I just knew that discipline mattered, then everything would be so easy. And the first couple of days or first week or so, I was like, God, this is hard. And to just be like, dig deep and understand that like hard is not going away. So might as well do something that you love. And once you understand that, then the work doesn't feel like work, you know? And
yeah. If you can learn to embrace the chaos and look at it like this is the norm, not the edge case.
Exactly.
When crazy things happen.
It's never an extreme, and it's never, you don't have to make an excuse for why it didn't work or not. It just is part of normalcy, right? Like that's every day of our lives, right? If walking was hard, then you'd dwell on walking, right? But if you don't even think twice about walking, then you just walk. You know what I mean? It sounds so simple, but
it is.
If we can create that for other things, then.
I know we were going to end on that, but now I got to talk to you about this because you have 2 kids, and I think about this a lot now because how we parent our kids is so different from how we were parented, right? And
sure.
You know, in so many positive ways, you know, considering their emotions and like talking through those things and
very much
talking them out and things like that. There's an amount of friction, and suffering might be the wrong word, but like struggle.
Sure, struggle. Struggle is the right word.
That like that resilience is what it helps you get better
100%.
and also helps you to manage the next time it happens
100%.
You know, and
you need a little bit of a shield or a barrier that at times is something you create yourself, but that means by actually falling, you fall so that you get up, right?
Yeah, you have to build those calluses.
And that idea of like, yes, we've been parented differently, but there was a phase where they were like not letting them fall. They were catching before they fall. And then you're like, if these kids never fall, then they never know how to get back up. Right.
Yeah.
And I think we've come full circle. I think our children that were sort of kids of however old we are will get a taste of both, right? Where yes, we know, we understand you have emotions and we're listening to you, but also fall.
Yeah.
And we'll pick you up. But like, get yourself up first, and then I'm going to be there and talk it out with you. And then you're going to learn to not fall next time. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Because look, you're going to fall no matter what.
No matter what. If we try to protect that, we're like.
So when you fall, when we're not around, and you've never fallen before because we've always stopped you from falling.
Right. Then you're
fucked.
You're proper fucked.
You know? So.
Yeah.
Anyways.
That's good.
This is a good way to end.
Yeah. Perfect.
Great, man.
Perfect.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
That's it, guys. Bye. Thanks for tuning into the Mies podcast. The music from the show is a remix of the song Art Mirror by an old friend, hip-hop artist, Fresh Daily. For show notes and more, visit getmees.com/podcast. That's GETMEEZ.com/podcast. If you enjoyed the show, I'd love it if you can share it with fellow entrepreneurs and culinary pros, and give us a 5-star rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. Keep innovating, don't settle, make today a little bit better than yesterday, and remember, it's impossible for us to learn what we think we already know. See you next time.